Hi, I'm Ari, I'm the Oak Witch, and in today's video I'm going to be going over the basics of spellcraft and spellwork. Spells. So pretty fundamental aspect of defining witchcraft as a magical tradition. Spells can take so many different forms, and I think that is the beauty of witchcraft. And I think something which kind of catches beginners is spells don't actually really happen that often. I feel like spells are really done when, they need to be done. It's pretty unrealistic that witches will be practicing spells every single day or multiple times a day. That just doesn't really happen. You kind of do spells when you need to do them. And a lot of beginner education in witchcraft content says for beginners to research first. Getting groundwork basics down before you get into spells and more practical content of your witchcraft practice. And this is something which I've said on my channel before. I do think it's important to research and sort of know what you're doing before you do it, but I do think sometimes it's a little overemphasized, because reality is that experience will be your greatest teacher, and so will your mistakes. So long as you're making mistakes safely, hence why we sort of focus on, being safe, doing your protections, making sure you sort of understand mundane fire safety, etc. Things like that. As long as you're being safe and you're being respectful in your magic and your approach, then, that's okay. And honestly, mistakes will happen, you will make mistakes, and the most important thing is learning from those mistakes. There's only so much you can read about spells before you actually just need to do the spell to know what it's like. What I aim to go through in this video is to essentially give a base guideline for both spellcraft and spellwork. Now, I am just one witch. I am an English folk witch, and of course that is just one witch's opinion. It's just my experience. My opinion is just one opinion of the many. But what I aim to go through this video is hopefully give a broad enough guideline to spells in order to allow you guys to be able to take the baseline approach and obviously put your flavour of magic, your flavour, your tradition over this sort of baseline. I just hope to essentially give some sort of basics for beginners who are kind of unsure of what a spellworking process would look like. In the spellcrafting process, I find there are three sort of things to consider as broad points. The first one being having a clear intention or goal. So here you'd look at, what do you want to achieve? Are you looking to increase material gain, to gain prosperity, money magic? Are you looking for some self-love, love magic? Are you looking to increase your chances in gaining that job you've applied for? Do you need some good luck spells? So you can start with just outlining, what do you want? What type of magic would that fall under? Healing magic, love magic, prosperity magic, protection magic, etc. After this, you can think about, why do you want to achieve this? So here you can look more specifically on what change you wish to seek. If you wish to get a new job, are you looking at a specific job application? Are you looking at a specific type of job? And think about, why do you want this job? Why do you need a new job? Do you need a new job because you need a higher salary? Do you need a new job because you're just really tired of your current one? Think about why you want this change. It will help strengthen your intention as a whole. And in this section you can look at, have you considered all of the non-magical options that are available to you? So for example, if we're looking at banishing magic and you want to get someone out of your life who's really annoying you and only causing you harm, have you tried communicating with them, telling them the harm that they're doing and why you wish to no longer speak with them? Have you tried blocking their number? All those sorts of non-magical things which you can sort of try and exhaust first before resorting to something which is more magical. Some more important things to consider, for example, in healing magic. If you found something wrong with your body and you want to do a healing spell, but have you gone to your doctor first just to check out what's wrong? Things like that, which I think are important to consider first as a part of outlining why you want to do this and why you want to seek this change. So in this we can look at who is involved in achieving this goal. So is it just a spell you're going to do on yourself? Is it a spell you're involving other people with? And if it's the latter option, this is something you need to consider yourself. And I'm not going to comment on what you should or shouldn't do. But if you're involving other people, something you want to consider maybe is that something you're going to give the other person's consent for? Some people think that yes, you definitely should always ask consent for any magic that you do, and some people don't necessarily see that, especially if we're looking at, for example, the banishing magic example. I'm not sure I would necessarily tell someone who I'm about to banish that I'm doing that spell on them. So whatever you decide, that's up to you. Of course, it's your perspective on how you think that should be employed, but that is something to consider as a part of that sort of, having a clear intentional goal. Who's going to be involved in the spell and to what degree are they involved? Another thing to consider in this concept of who will be involved is maybe if you're petitioning any spirits or deities. And that'll be something I'll talk about more in the next section, but it's just something you might want to consider when you're also thinking about your intention or goal. So yeah, something which I've touched on before, the last thing to consider in this section is how do you want to achieve this? What specifically are you expecting to happen when you do this magic so that this goal is achieved? For example, if you need a little bit more money coming through the door, you're going to do some money prosperity magic, are you going to achieve this through perhaps getting a promotion that you've been looking up for? Or are you going to try and increase your salary, ask for a raise, get a bonus? Are you going to be making more money through a side hustle that you have going on? Things like that to consider when we're looking at things like money magic and your intention. So you may have a change that you wish to seek, but how do you want that change to happen? Being kind of clear in that can really help the magic flow and be more specific in your intentions. So of course in this section, I guess something to consider is that the goal needs to be attainable. So looking at specifically how you want to achieve this goal and this intention can really help analyze whether or not the intention or goal is actually attainable. And having an attainable, realistic goal or intention is extremely helpful in the spellcrafting process. One last thing I think to consider is how long do you expect to wait to achieve this goal? So when you're setting a goal, it can really help to have a timeline for when you expect the spell to work, for when you expect the magic to work. This can be helpful just for your own benefit as a magical practitioner to keep record of, when you did the spell, when is it finished, and for example, when you can try again if it didn't work. Because sometimes you can sort of do a spell working and then not really know when it's worked because you haven't really thought about when you expected it to work, so you could sort of just be waiting forever. So I think it's good to sort of set a timeline, and whatever that timeline looks like will be down to the individual spell. Of course, there's some really obvious examples where, if you're looking to, I used an example before about job hunting or getting that job you've applied for. If you've just applied for the job, that might be a good few days to hear back from someone, and if they haven't, then probably didn't get it, and then you'd have to try again. So once you have this intention, this goal down, and you're pretty clear on its objectives and what you wish to achieve, how you wish to achieve it, why, who's involved, we can look at the methodology. So in this section you would be looking at, what type of spell are you going to employ to achieve your goal? So I guess you can break this down by looking at, is the goal something which is going to be more long-term or short-term? For example, you want to increase your chances of getting this job you've just applied for. You might want to do just a quick candle spell, using that symbolic element of fire to speed up the process, and you might want to add some herbs that really help with speeding up the processes, like some chili or some cinnamon, and that's just a very short spell which you can do in sort of a singular sitting, depending on the type of candle, I guess. But for example, if you know that the spell is going to be a bit more longer term, for example, you're house hunting and you want to do a spell that can really help find you the perfect house, the house that you really want to get and the house that's like perfect for you. So you may want to do something like a charm bag, or you might want to do like a prosperity bowl specifically for houses, and this would be something which you would leave in like a safe space, maybe just on your altar for a longer period of time, so the spell would be sort of ongoing, and the method, such as a prosperity bowl, would reflect that. Say you want to protect your space from any harmful or malefic energy or spirits that have been directed your way, you might want to put up a protective talisman. Of course, this is a bit more longer term because you would craft a talisman and you'd hang it on your home and your window and your doors, any sort of liminal spaces on your thresholds, and that would be a part of this long-term magic. That'd be something which you would sort of have up for a longer period of time, as the magic will continually work, obviously, until you need to redo it again. So you can employ specific methods to correspond with your type of intention of your goal. There isn't a specific way each intention needs to be carried out. You know, you don't always have to do bowls for money magic, you don't always have to do charm bags for protection magic. You know, there are so many different ways you can blend these spell methods for these intentions. It's really just down to you, what's attainable and accessible for you. So I wouldn't get too bogged down on trying to sort of fit the perfect spell method. If you just need to do something which works for you, then that's fine. Do what intuitively feels best for you. Something to consider, I guess, in this methodology process is, are you gonna sort of incorporate any outer layers for the spell? So for this I mean things like, are you going to burn any incense to correspond with your intention? So if I'm doing a specific prosperity working, I might want to burn my prosperity incense whilst I'm doing the spell to act as a layer for that, you know, correspondence for that intention for that spell itself. Maybe playing any background music. A lot of people do this to help raise energy, which I'll talk about in the next section. But yeah, you might want to think about any music you want to play in the background that will help correspond to your intention. Or maybe if I'm refreshing a protection charm, I want to make sure I have enough protection oil to put in the charm bag, etc. So it's having that like outer layer ingredients that you might want to just flavour onto your spell. So are you going to incorporate any of that? Because obviously if you want to include like a specific type of oil, then you have to make the oil ready for that spell. Something which I use in my own practice is having a sort of corresponding symbol to put on this slate plate that I have on my altar, and I just use chalk and then put a, for example, protective symbol on the bottom and then have my working on top. So it's a part of the spell, but it's still an outer layer of it. And something which I touched on in the having the clear intention section is this concept of petitioning spirits or deities or invoking them for your spell work. Now this obviously can act as an outer sort of layer for the correspondence of your goal, but it can be calling to a specific spirit or deity to help this process go along, to help the magic work. Now obviously we have specific deities that sort of govern specific natural phenomenon or have specific associations and can help in certain ways, and calling to these deities for help can be really helpful in this process. Something I will say is that I don't think it is worth treating deities like spell correspondences. I think for anyone, and not just beginners, it's worth doing efficient research and establishing a relationship with that spirit or deity before you just randomly start asking things for it. To use an example, you know, I'd never go up to a stranger and say, hey, can you get this job for me? I would never expect a stranger to do something like that for me, something so personal, and they sure as hell wouldn't do that for me, so I'm not sure why I would really expect a deity to do the same. So I do think there is an importance in having that base relationship with this deity, with this spirit, establishing that sort of mutual connection, and then perhaps asking for things, you know? I do think there is cultural nuances here, and I'm not going to say that my way is a universally objective right way, but this is just my perspective as a folk witch. Something else to consider in the methodology process is, where are you going to do the spell? Are you going to do the spell on your altar? Are you going to do it outside in a park by a tree? Do you have an outside altar? So think very simple process. Just think about where you're going to do it. If it is a longer term spell, so if it's something that, for example, you might need to hang somewhere, you might need to pop it somewhere. For example, I might want to do a protection charm bag for when I'm traveling, and I might want to put that in the pocket of the coat I will be using if I'm going on public transport. If I'm driving in a car, then I might want to pop the charm bag in my car somewhere. So obviously that's something to consider in this concept of where will you be doing the spell. Sometimes you just do the spell at your altar and it can just last in that specific time period, or if it's something which you need to place somewhere, you might want to think about if there's a specific area which you can place the spell that will correspond nicely to your intention. Something that may require a bit more forethought is the concept of when are you going to do your spell. So are you going to align the spell with a specific magical timing or significant time for magic? So some really popular ones are like the moon phases. Each moon phase corresponds with a specific intention and association for making magic. So any magic you're doing to attract things your way, you might want to do in the waxing phase of the moon, and anything you're doing to repel, to banish, to send things away from you, you might want to do in the waning phase. So there's ways in which you can incorporate the lunar phases into your magic, and having this as an extra sort of layer of correspondence for your spell. Another thing magical practitioners use a lot is the idea of planetary magic, so planetary timings. And this could be something as simple as literally just the day of the week. So if I want to do a money working, I might want to do it on a Thursday for Jupiter. If I'm doing a self-love working, I'll do it on a Friday for Venus, for love. So that's something you can incorporate as a significant timing. You can even go further in depth with planetary hours, which you can calculate. There are also apps that calculate it for you, so you don't have to do all the math, but if you want to calculate it yourself, go ahead. But yeah, so you can get really specific with the planetary timings as well. And of course people go by the sun as well, doing magic on specific sort of solar holidays, solar festivals throughout the year. But yeah, there's many ways you can sort of incorporate magic. But something else to consider is that you don't have to wait on a specific day or a specific time if you just really need to get the magic done. If you just need to get the magic done, just do it. Doesn't really matter when you do it, just if you need to get it done, best option is probably just to do it. The significant timings can just act as that correspondence to add on to that magic. It can definitely help, but obviously it's not a necessity, essentially. So in this methodology process, something else to consider is what visualizations, affirmations, or incantations will you incorporate it during your spell. This whole concept of visualizations, this energy work, can really help move about that energy and direct it somewhere using the visualizations, or your witch sight, as a lot of folk witchcraft spaces tend to say. So for example, if you are doing a protection working for something specific, you might want to visualize yourself with a nice blue sort of orb light around you, protecting you in this sort of bubble. If you want to get a specific promotion at a specific job you work at, you might want to visualize your boss handing you something which says you've got a promotion. There's certain visualizations that you can incorporate that obviously is individual to your intention, to your situation, that you can sort of visualize during the spell process to help attain that goal in the magical process. Now obviously not everyone can visualize, and this is something which isn't really talked about a lot, something I've not really gone over in my channel. I thought I'd briefly talk about it here. And it's okay if you're not really able to see images that well and visualize. There are other ways in which you can visualize and have this concept of energy work. So obviously there's just the concept of raising energy and directing it sort of within you, and you can feel it sort of rise. That's just in itself quite handy. But if you wanted to incorporate that sort of visualization-esque work, obviously you can use your other senses. Hearing your boss say, oh, here's your promotion, or affirmations to yourself like I am protected. You can also focus on emotions and feelings if it is if it's money working and you want to do that visualization of, being really happy that you got the money coming in the door. You can conjure up that feeling of happiness, of joy, of celebrating, or feeling really happy. Or if that looks more like security to you, feeling really content and financially secure. There's different ways you can incorporate emotion into that feelings. It doesn't necessarily have to be visualization of images if that's what you get quite stuck on and you struggle with. So of course, like I sort of alluded to, you can incorporate affirmations, so you can say out loud or in your head, you know, I am protected from blah 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 blah. I am protected during travel from this place to this place. You can sort of say those affirmations. People incorporate sort of rhythmic chanting, and that can be really helpful for raising their energy and then redirecting it into the spell to help that magic flow. People sing as well. You can also use incantations from folklore. So something I incorporate in my English folk magic, specific chants that have been recorded as folklore sayings, and you can then adopt it into your practice. This is something which Roger J. Horn talks about a lot in his book The Witch's Art of Incantation, which I did a book review for on my Patreon. If anyone's interested, you can sort of go watch it there. Of course, this is really cool to do if you practice a specific folk magic tradition and you want to incorporate that into your spell working. Obviously, that's where you can apply your background onto the spell. So that's just a few ways in which you can incorporate energy work, affirmations or incantations in your methodology process. There are way many more, but yeah. And the last section of the spell crafting process for me, I feel, is availability. So this will be more about looking at yourself, looking at what you have, and when you're obviously crafting the spell, because at the methodology process we look at the spell method. So if you know you're going to do a charm bag, and in the charm bag you know you're going to maybe put some crystals, some rocks, maybe some like little sort of charms or talismans, or maybe some herbs, and this next process will be looking at what you actually have available to you. So you can look at your herb cupboard or your herb drawer, and you can look at what herbs you have to correspond with your goal that you can incorporate in your charm bag. I think this can be quite important to just emphasize what you have, what's available and local to you, because you don't always have to go out of your way to buy fresh ingredients for every spell. Under this ingredients section we can look at not just ingredients you're going to use for your spell and what you have, what you might need to get, but also looking at if you're going to petition any spirits or any deities, you might want to think about getting offerings for them for the spell. So this can include lots of different things, and like I said before, if you're going to make a spell oil, you might want to make sure you have that ingredient before you do the spell, so just making sure you're prepared essentially. And I guess in this availability, if you do need to get more ingredients, we can think about perhaps some more sustainable options, as coming from the sort of eco-friendly practitioner background that I have. So we can look at, is there anything which you can forage nearby, herbs or plants or natural material from trees in your area that can help towards this spell and that correspondence? Or is there anything in a local shop that you can get, rather than ordering stuff online that comes like overseas or travels loads of miles to get to you? So yeah, I hope that helps as a spell crafting guide and helps think about the thought processes you might want to go through before conducting a spell. Of course, sometimes like if you're in a rush and you just need to do a spell, you might not always sit down and go through every single point beforehand, but I find that for beginners it might help having a guide like this to really think about each step, to sort of help you getting used to sort of being careful, being mindful in your magic, and yeah. So now I'm gonna go over the spell working process, and just to add, like I said before, this isn't the only right way to perform a spell, and to be honest, the way in which you will do spells will change and it will evolve, and as you grow, as you develop, as you just age, it just will. I've certainly changed the way I have performed spells, even just over the last year. I just feel like I'm like trying new things all the time, and that's a good thing. So just note that like one way of course is not the only right way, and anyway, let me just get into it. So the first step, I guess, is to gather the ingredients, your tools, everything you're going to use to craft the spell in front of you. You know, in wherever space you are, you want to sort of gather them in front of you and lay them out, just so it's clear on what you need to do and where you're sort of gonna do it. After this, you might want to then cleanse the area. you know, your person, your body, the objects if needed. And ways to cleanse: you can smoke cleanse, which is quite popular for people nowadays, or you can sound cleanse. I use like a bell. You can use a besom or a broom to sort of sweep the energies and sort of cleanse the area. So many different ways you can cleanse. And you know what? I was actually thinking about doing a cleansing video. I have spoken about cleansing in a prior video before, which I'll link there. I briefly spoke about it there, but I can do a cleansing 101 if you guys would want that. If you do, please let me know. I'm not sure if you want me to expand more on what I've sort of already said on my channel. But anyway, I think cleansing can really help because it will help sort of get rid of any lingering energies that are tied to the objects, to the area, to your altar space, or wherever you do the spell, so that the spell that you're about to do, you know, is a sort of fresh start. Another good thing to do is to center yourself, and this can involve just taking a few deep mindful breaths, do some mindfulness meditation to begin with. Something which I also like to do is just to be still and be sort of clear my head, clear my thoughts, and look around the room and to utilize my different senses to pick up on what I can see around me, what I can hear or smell or touch, or taste if I have like a cup of tea or water or something. So there's some ways you can sort of center yourself in really sort of simple ways. And doing this before a spell can really help get into that zone, get into that mindset of performing a spell, being centered in your thoughts, so you're not too sort of scrambled up in there. You can be very clear in your magic and have that intention or goal that you want to achieve really clear on your head. So something which I'll talk about here is the concept of casting a circle. Now this is optional. I'm not saying this as a vital part of the spellworking process because I don't really even cast a circle. That's why I haven't really done a video on it, because it's not something I really employ in my practice. I don't really feel the need to with the type of folk magic I do. I will if I do sort of broader, bigger rituals, but honestly I am a folk witch, so I'm largely based on folk magic spells, charms, things like that, and I don't really need to cast a circle to do those spells. Some people want to because, you know, casting a circle can really help keep that energy in that space and help with the directing it, or can really protect you as well if you're, you know, casting a protective circle. So they certainly have their uses and they can be very handy. And maybe if you're a beginner and you really want to just get used to employing different magical techniques, there might be something you want to consider just trying out. So I thought I'd add it in here. And obviously there's so many different ways you can cast a circle. Some people literally just invoke the elements at different directions, and you can do this sort of spirit energetically wise, or you can get physical objects to represent each element and you can sort of place them about you in the specific directions. Some people call to the guidance of the watchtowers, and this is quite a popular one to utilise, along with, you know, just using different tools. So people can use an athame to cut through the energy, the atmosphere and the sort of air. People use a stang as well for this in more traditional witchcraft spaces, and I find in traditional witchcraft it's much more of an emphasis on laying a physical circle, so laying down soil or salt. But PS, please don't salt the earth, it's really bad for the environment. But obviously if you're just salting like your floor and you're doing a ritual inside, do what you want. But yeah, so casting a circle is an option. I'll maybe leave some links down below if you wanted a better explanation of casting a circle than what I've given. I've probably not explained it very well, but I'll link some videos or some articles down below that you can sort of go through if you want. So after you've sort of gotten yourself ready, you would then do the spell method that is particular to your spell. So for example, if it's a candle spell, you might want to get your candle, anoint it with the oil, or carve anything or put herbs on it that you have decided that you're going to do, like the candle. Or if you're going to create a charm bag, you want to pop the ingredients into the charm bag. So whatever spell method that you've sort of decided for your spell, for your intention, perform those actions. And alongside this, you might want to employ some of that energy work or spirit work or any sort of process that helps charge the object. As a modern animist, I sort of see a spirit, a sort of life force in all things. And when I'm working with, for example, herbs, if I'm putting herbs in a charm bag in my spell, the charging process I'll use is talking to the spirit of this herb, asking the spirit to work with me in this working, to tell them what I wish to achieve and why, and how I wish to achieve it. So go through my intention or my goal in a clearer way, to ask or petition it to work with me here in this magic, and then pop it in the charm bag, and then thanking it. And as such, I'd sort of do this with the things that I'm popping it into the charm bag. Sometimes I employ things like, if I'm closing the charm bag, I might kiss it to seal it as done. If I'm doing a candle spell, I might talk to the spirit of the flame. There's different sort of ways I sort of use language and sort of communication in this sort of animistic spirit work sense to charge the object, you know. And the energy work side, I say, is more commonly talked about in modern eclectic witchcraft spaces. So it is this concept of raising that energy and directing it into the spell. And people raise energy through dancing, through movement, you know, through singing, or just playing music in general. Any music which you feel corresponds to your intention. Say you want to do a self-love working, you might want to play music which makes you feel really good about yourself, and you can employ that in that raising energy, because you're building that energy, those emotions within you, and you can direct that into the spell. Another method to raise energy is to utilize certain breath work, and of course if you're well practiced into energy work, it'd be quite simple just to feel that energy rise and then to redirect it. And people use a wand or a stang as witchcraft tools to utilize this process. Of course, during the spell method process, as I said before in the prior section, you'd employ your incantations, your visualizations, your affirmations to help whilst you are performing the spell. That really helps that process. So this is what you would do in this section. So in this spell method process that you may carry out, this may also involve now petitioning the spirit or the deity which you are calling to help you with this working, and then this may involve giving the offering to the spirit, to this deity, to whoever it is, and then be clear in your intention, be clear in what you wish to receive and what you are giving them in return. So once the spell is sort of crafted, you can then seal it. So a really popular one is "So mote it be." A British folk saying is "I wind, I bind, the spell be mine." I quite like that one. In an animistic sense, and obviously if you're calling any spirits or deities in particular, you can thank them for their presence and thank them for helping, and then wish them to depart. With specific spell workings, as I alluded to before, you might want to just incorporate like a kiss to seal the spell, or for example, if I'm doing like a jar spell, I might just tie a knot around the rim of the jar to sort of seal the spell, seal my intention in it. People utilize like wax on top of jars to seal that as well. People do that nowadays as well. So there are different ways you can sort of seal the spell depending on the spell method that you've used. And yeah, and then you ground afterwards and center. So grounding afterwards can literally just be like grabbing something to eat, drinking a cup of tea, be something else, just going outside and just breathing some fresh air. It doesn't have to be anything massively dramatic. You can just take some time to really just be in your surroundings, and then afterwards, if you feel like you need to center yourself again, yeah, you can do some mindfulness meditations or some breath work, and yeah, just take some time to really come back down to reality. Because sometimes when you're doing spells, it can get very intense, especially, you know, you're raising the energy and you're directing it. Sometimes it can get quite intense for some people, and beginners, if you're not really quite used to it, you might need to like come down from it, and it's important to make sure you're balanced afterwards. And yeah, the spell is done. Woo, congrats. This next session I'm going to talk about is just some general spell tips. So these are just helpful tips or advice on when you are performing spells. And one thing I would like to talk about is using your tone and the cadence of your voice when you are doing incantations or you're saying affirmations. Utilizing the different sounds of your voice and the way in which you say these words, if you do say them out loud, can really help. It can really aid that magical process and go along your intention that you are sort of seeking. For example, if I am doing a protection spell and it's something which I want to make me feel really secure, I'll speak strongly and firmly and know that I am protected. If I'm doing a self-love working, I might talk more softly and more gently and really nourishing in my tone and really make myself feel really good about myself. Of course, if you're doing a banishing working, you might want to talk a bit more sternly, a bit more sharply and strongly. So there's ways in which you can use the cadence, the tone and the way you're speaking in these affirmations, in these chants, to really help that magic. But something I guess also to note is that you don't have to say things out loud. That's not a requirement. You know, sometimes for people, you can't really say things out loud if you're doing a spell in secret, if you're sort of in a busy place, or if you're, you know, got nosy neighbours or just nosy roommates. Sometimes you don't really feel comfortable saying things out loud. And that's okay, you know. I think you can still be quite clear in your thoughts, you know, saying things in your head. So I can really help to practice your meditation, to clear your mind so that you are focused in your thoughts. For me, I like to say things out loud and directly. It just helps direct that energy and direct that magic towards what I want to achieve. For me, that helps me focus. And for people maybe with like intrusive thoughts and anxiety, that can really help, just to help get the words out of your head and really make that magic happen. But of course, it's not a requirement. You can say things in your head. You don't have to speak out loud if you're not able to do so and if you don't really want to. So another thing which you don't necessarily have to do is, if you are writing your incantations, they don't necessarily have to rhyme. For me, I like things that rhyme because it helps get my mind in that zone and help that sort of like flow, but that works for me. But they don't always have to rhyme. I think there's this misconception that spells need to have that like poetic rhyming, but they don't necessarily have to. So yeah, that's a false misconception. Another tip I have is to write down in a journal your spell crafting and spell working processes. I just find this is, not everyone likes to write things down, and you don't like have to, but I find it can be really helpful just to keep track on what spells you're doing at what times. It can really help as well if it did go wrong or if it did fail and you're then looking back on what you did, and you can sort of see perhaps maybe where you made a mistake, or perhaps what you left out, or what you'd want to change in the future when you try again. Also, I find it's really helpful to track down the little things like making spell oils. I've had it before where I've made spell oils, I've forgotten to write them down, and then like a month or so later I'm like looking at the spell oil and I'm like, what is this? What was this for? I don't remember. So don't, you know, try not to do that. So now I always make a note to write it down. So yeah, very important if you're very forgetful like me. So ultimately, spell crafting, you know, spell work, it is a process which is so individual and unique to each individual practitioner. And also, magic is a skill and it's an art form, and it will really take time, experience and patience to nail it down, to get something which works for you, and that's a process which really is your own, you know. So although I've tried to give a guideline, a base guideline for how to craft a spell and how to do a spell, note that, you know, if there's anything here which you disagree with and actually you want to do differently and that I haven't mentioned, that is okay, you know, it's completely fine, and I really encourage it if anything. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it, and if this was helpful to you, give it a like, it really helps me out, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!